The funding for this video is provided by the amazing members of our Patreon. Also contributions from viewers like you. Thank you. Yeah, I started from PBS Kids. What you gonna do? Fight me? Anyway, roll the video. Art imitates life, and life imitates art. So much of the media we consume is heavily influenced by our society, and how we react to it is how we feel about society. Fandom racism is something that I and many other people are so tired of but won't fucking shut up about because it needs to be spoken about. Anytime a person of color, specifically a black person, expresses dislike for a fictional white character, you will have some non-black person try to tell them that they are wrong about them and should change their mind. And, no, don't do that. People fail to understand that plenty of people of color dislike fictional characters because they remind them of the horrible people that they have encountered and dealt with in real life. I had a teacher a lot like Ms. Bustier and I didn't like them. Because of that, I don't like Ms. Bustier all that much. I don't like nor do I care for Monet DeHaan from the new Gossip Girl because she reminds me a lot of the mean rich girls I had to deal with in school. And I don't like BoJack Horseman because he reminds me of arrogant men that I have dealt with at work. And I don't like Alex Russo because I had so-called friends that treated me terribly, like how she treated Harper. I find it interesting how black people within fandom feel as if they have to explain why they don't like a white fictional character, but white people in fandom can dislike black and non-white characters as much as they please and everyone goes, that's just their opinion, when it's really just racism. Racism is not an opinion, you dickhead. But when I, a person of color, express how I don't like a fictional white character because they are just simply an awful person, the attacks come out. Hold up. People of color do not have to like fictional mean white people. Hey y'all, it's Harriyanna and I'm back with another video. Hi, hello, how are you guys doing? My name is Harriyanna and welcome back to the pirate ship, also known as Harry Hook's pirate ship. I am the captain. You are not my first mate. I don't got no first mate because you want to know why? Bring your ear closer to the camera so you can hear me clearly. Nobody's worthy of being the first mate, but hi, hello, how are you guys doing? My name is Harriyanna and I like to make content based off nostalgia and family, children's entertainment, and all the issues I find within those spaces. Now, we have a brief disclaimer before we get into today's subject matter. If my face looks really greasy right now, that's because it is. I ended up having a really bad eczema flare up and it spread all over my face and it's like all over my hands. And because of that, I just don't feel too comfortable being on camera the entire time until it starts to heal a little bit. The reason why I got my sunglasses on right now is because it's really bad around my eyes. I'm just not in the mood for people to be like talking shit about my appearance, especially when it has something to do with something I have no control over. Like, people are fucking rude, people are annoying, and it honestly really hurts to talk because I have cracks on like the corners of my mouth right now. It's just kind of been a really rough period for me at the moment, but I still wanted to get on here. I wanted to record the intro on camera and then I'll do the outro on camera just as well. So let's get into today's subject matter on how people of color do not have to like fictional mean characters. They don't. They absolutely don't. Alright, let's get into it. As fandom racism is a subject that is getting more attention, that means we should continue to speak about it. If you haven't seen my hour-long video about fandom racism, I highly recommend you do. I even made an entire playlist of all my videos on the subject of fandom racism. Check that out if you will. But that video right there specifically is just some of the basics of when it comes to this terrible phenomenon And here in this video, I'm going to elaborate on this a bit more. I said this last time and I will say it again, but now is not the time to try to speak over people of color, especially black women. Now is the time for you to shut up and listen. I can't get you on my side, boy. Better go and get another drink, 'cause you ain't getting on my. People don't seem to understand that what we watch and engage with can have an effect on us, which is part of the reason why I don't play video games, because of the uneasiness it brings me, because of how awful I am at them, and they just make me really jittery. I understand the importance of nuance when it comes to art, because so many people miss the point because they lack it. So let's take Danganronpa for example. For one, it's a video game, so I automatically don't care. And then I found out it ended up getting a show. But often I get questions from my supporters about how I feel about Danganronpa, and they're asking me to watch it and play it and make a video on it, and the answer is no. Danganronpa is something that makes me very uncomfortable, and for the sake of my health, I choose not to engage with it. I'd much rather not get attached to another fictional character that gets killed off and I'm hurt. I'm looking at you, Finnick Oldare from the Hunger Games. And also, I'm looking at you, Misa and Elle from Death Note. Sorry, what the fuck was Death Note? Like, seriously. I'm glad Light got what he deserved in the end, but no. Misa and Elle, that shit hurt it. But anyway, yeah. About Danganronpa, the story may be good, the video game may be fun, but I don't have to engage with something that I know I will be terrified of. I know it will be scary for me. People tend to avoid media that brings them discomfort, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But let's talk about it when it comes to something that causes you discomfort and something that is comforting for you. That's a bit more complicated because you can't really avoid that all that much, especially if what is uncomforting to you is always there. Oftentimes, you're not gonna like every character and everything you watch, read, or play, because that's normal. You're not gonna like everyone. People aren't interested in fan art of characters they don't like. But then you know you're gonna have those who can't handle the fact that someone dislikes a person that doesn't exist, which starts up fandom war bullshit, and because of this, there's something extremely strange about it. There's also something that I've noticed within fandom spaces, is that when a person of color brings up how they don't like a white celebrity or a white fictional character, the reasons are valid. But when it comes to a celebrity of color or a non-white fictional character, they often dislike them for the traits that they like with their white celebrities and fictional characters, which I find very interesting. And one thing a lot of fandom people do, like I've mentioned before, they take out their dislike for people of color out on fictional characters. It's not the same thing, my guy. Anyway, interesting. And I, as a black woman, I have noticed that so much of our media lets white characters get away with doing the most, while characters of color do not. Because that's so much of what the world is. Let's take white women for example. In film, white women often do get away with bad behavior, and when they do it, it's seen as girl power and such. Like, look at Harley Quinn. Why do y'all wonder why her character is so popular? She's a terrible person who does terrible things, but because she's hot and white, people tend to excuse her bad behavior. Media loves to hype up white women who are horrible people and do terrible things, which is why we have the series on ID, the Investigation Discovery Channel, called Deadly Women. That show right there will tell you that white women be just as bad as white men. I mentioned this before in my White Woman Tears video, but people have such a hard time believing that white women can be just as vile and racist as white men. To the point where people didn't want to believe that white women were involved in KKK, they have their own Wikipedia page about it. And mind you, plenty of my favorite characters are white women, by the way. When they are wrong, and they do not need defending for their bad actions. And I want to sit here and read you guys a piece from Angry Black Girl, which has examples of why this is very frustrating for people of color. My freshman year of college, my 5'1" blonde roommate, Elizabeth, busted into our suite and called me a fucking bitch over something I said on Twitter. She was drunk and aggressive. I was sober and half asleep. I told her to go away, and she advanced into my personal space, yelling and knocking over my perfume bottles. I looked at her in disbelief. Just last week, we shared a heart-to-heart over Russian vodka on the floor of our closet, discussing her old heroin addiction and my traumatic early high school years. She gritted her teeth and told me that she kicked my ass, then left. In the next hour, I got into a screaming match with some white guys from down the hall who came out of the room to protect her while I came looking for her. I ended up sleeping in the basement. The next week, I was serving a restraining order and told I was facing expulsion from school, plus forced to move out immediately. To sweeten the shit, Stu, little Elizabeth told the school that I was a drug addict and I was subsequently forced to take drug tests and $100 drug counseling session for 2 semesters. Though Elizabeth had threatened me first, she had no issue convincing the school that a 5'7" black girl was a danger to her personal safety. It wasn't the first or last time a white woman had used their privilege to cite me, but I thought about this particular incident recently watching the wildly popular Jordan Peele creation Get Out. While the male members of the Armitage family were aggressive and at times openly hostile before their film's big climax, Rose and her mother Missy were sickeningly sweet. I watched the plot unfold on screen. I wonder if Rose was in with her parents' nefarious plot to hypnotize Chris. As soon as Rose said, "Nobody messes with my man," forgive me if this wasn't for verbatim, I saw the film on a very hazy weekend in New Orleans, and I consider myself fortunate to remember the basics of the plot. In the car, on the way to her parents, I knew that bitch wasn't to be trusted. The way she said "my man" and explicitly annoyed me, and I instantly disliked her. But then my guilt kicked in. Not all white women suck. I resonated with myself. Maybe it was my silly prejudices. Maybe she's not a villain. Maybe she's just some white girl who might get caught up in some shit. With those considerations in mind, I plunged my hand into a bucket of buttered popcorn and waited to find out. After Missy pulled her little teacup trick on Chris to help him kick his nicotine addiction, I tried not to let my mind go into bitter black woman mode. Not all white women suck. I decided that Rose had hypnotized by her mother and was participating in the dark Armitage family secret. My theory felt more plausible after Rose and Chris had a teary-eyed heart-to-heart while white people bid for the privilege of owning him. But later, as Chris flipped through the damning photos in the closet, I knew what my gut instinct told me to be true. Rose, like a lot of white women, sucked. Rose and Misty showed concern, had manners, and kept their temper in check while their male counterparts reeked in irrationality, violence, and oddity. But by the end of the film, their marks of delicate white femininity were peeled back to reveal hateful monsters. As a historian, this spoke to me on a spiritual level. America's past is rife of kind-faced white women who exploited, abused, or accused black people for their own benefit. To sum up what I just read, Alexis Jonday, the author, was talking about how she was put in horrible situations because of white women using their privilege against her, and how she was suffering consequences for something that, one, wasn't her fault, and two, not doing anything wrong. White people used their privilege against her and it almost got her expelled from college. And for those of you who don't know, getting expelled from college is a very bad look, especially if you're a black person. Plenty of my opinions about white privilege and white supremacy did not change until I turned 18 and started working around white people. While yeah, I already was a bit well educated on the subject of race, experiencing and seeing it for myself in real time in real life was a bit jarring for me because while yes, I knew things like this happen, but it was surreal for me because of how often they happen in real life. Racism and using white privilege to get out of things are normalized to white people to the point where plenty of them see it as casual and don't think it's a problem. And I didn't know that until I was around white people my own age when I entered adulthood. I have met plenty of great white people, and I've also met plenty of terrible ones, like you do with all groups of people. But to meet a white person who's racist in real life is, that's different. For the longest, until I graduated high school, the only white people I encountered in my life were white people who were older than me, not any white people in my own age. And those simply were the teachers and the administrators that worked at the schools that I attended, the white people that I dealt with when I went shopping, and other white people that I came in passing with when I went to like places like Six Flags in the mall. As I didn't like a lot of mean adult fictional white people, like Miss Trunchbull from Matilda and that mean lady from The Parent Trap, I felt a bit different towards white fictional children because I didn't know how they acted or whatever. Let's take Pacifica Northwest, for example. Back in the day when Gravity Falls was out, I was the exact same age as Dipper and Mabel, the two lead kids in the show. So when Pacifica was in the series, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, and I was like, oh, maybe she's not that terrible. But then when I got older and I learned about white supremacy and white privilege, I realized that's literally what her character reeked of, and now I can't fucking stand her. Editing me here. Okay, I felt like I need to elaborate a little bit more on that Pacifica Northwest insert, but I was talking about how white privilege and white supremacy. When you look at Gravity Falls, that is a majority white town, and basically all the white people are in charge of everything there. All right, like that's like so much of America. Okay, it's white people being in charge of the government there, and what they say goes. And then there's a lot of issues that come along with that. And because you had this family that was in charge of this town, it led to their daughter thinking that she had this, superiority over everyone because of that. And she treated everyone like shit. And I'm not trying to come out here and say that Pacifica was racist, because no, I don't think she was racist. She was literally mean to everyone. And yes, I understand that she does have a horrible home life despite her, being a mean girl. She does have awful parents that treat her like a freaking animal. Like, yeah, I feel bad for the girl, but just because I feel bad for her doesn't mean that I have to like her, because like I said, when I finally got around white people my own age, I dealt with Pacifica Northwest's rich white women that had everything handed to them and they were just not nice. I've dealt with people like her in real life. They're terrible. Like I said, this changed when I became an adult. I went from going to a school with only black kids and white teachers to entering a college that had more than just black people attending it, along with the work field that I entered in. I was finally around white people my own age, the good and the bad ones. And I finally started to deal with horrible white people like the ones in the shows and the movies I watch so often. One of the white characters in shows that I changed my opinion on when I got around white people my own age was Robin and Teen Titans. I loved Robin's character as a kid, as I thought he was a great leader. He was awful, oh my gosh. But now that I'm older and have dealt with white people like Robin and realized that I was the cyborg in those situations, I can't fucking stand him. Out of all of the Titans, he was the one that clashed the most with Cyborg, and it rubbed me the wrong way, as Cyborg's characters had so many issues despite him being labeled as good representation. I mentioned this before on my channel, but just because a token black character only has great traits about them does not mean that they're good representation, because at the end of the day, they're still a token. Anyway, I will elaborate more on that when I get to Every Teen Titans Review Volume 3. It's still coming, just give me some time. But long story short, so much of Cyborg's character development had to do with his identity and not much else. And if it wasn't about him being a half-black robot, it was him getting into it with Robin. Cyborg called him out on not being a great leader because he wasn't. He was terrible. Editing me here. Okay, I need to elaborate a little bit more when I said Robin wasn't a good leader. When I said Robin wasn't a good leader, I didn't mean he was a bad leader all the time, but so much of his leadership skills came from the fact that he felt as if he was above everybody, which made no sense because he had no fucking powers. It's just like Robin acted like he knew everybody's powers better than he did, and that was very frustrating. And people that think they better than everybody shouldn't be leaders like that. Like, you don't know how Cyborg acts with his own body. You don't know how Starfire acts with her own body. You don't know how Raven acts with her own body. And you don't know how Beast Boy acts with his own body. Like, baby, no, calm down. Like, I'm telling y'all, his character is like really fucking irritating. I can't stand him. Cyborg was the one that called Robin out for not being that great of a leader as he thought he was. Because Robin had a lot of issues when it came to his leadership skills because he didn't want to listen to anyone and he thought he was right about everything. And the one that called him out was the black one. And when they got into it, woo-hoo-hoo. I want to speak on the subject of black forgiveness, as this is something that has stirred up so much of the fandom racism within fandom spaces. Now, what is black forgiveness, you may ask? Black forgiveness is the phenomenon where black people are expected to forgive non-black people for being wrong and racist towards them. We have seen this on and on and on and on, that so much of American history is black people forgiving white people and non-black people of color for their anti-blackness towards them. This entire debate about anti-blackness within the Asian communities is draining because you either have non-black people saying, oh, they didn't mean it like that, you should be understanding because they are a person of color like you. And yes, black and Asian people do have similar struggles, but that does not excuse the anti-Asian sentiment within the black community and an anti-blackness within the Asian community. We can have both conversations. And yes, all of this does lead back to white supremacy, but these are issues within these spaces that we do need to solve. Black people can be racist towards Asian people, and Asian people can be racist towards black people. It is something that has been proven on and on and on again. We see this shit happen all the time when it comes to the subject of anime. Anime, and K-pop. There is so much anti-blackness within anime and K-pop, and you often have people saying, oh, they're a person of color like you, it doesn't matter, you should forgive them. And no, we shouldn't have to forgive them for doing blackface in the 21st century. Excuse me? What? We shouldn't have to forgive them for coming into our communities and harassing us, but easily taking our money. With the beauty supply store situation. And then also, we don't need black people being disrespectful to the workers at Asian restaurants. Okay? We can have these discussions, y'all. Don't be so... One thing I need people to understand is that when it comes to the subject of race, it's not one set thing. Racism is a very, very broad spectrum. I've mentioned this before on my channel, but just because two different things happen does not mean that two different things are not racist. Yes, doing blackface is racist. Yes, a non-black person saying the N-word is racist. Those are two different things, but guess what? They're both racist. When it comes to the subject of black forgiveness, we are often told to forgive for very extreme things or things that are a bit on the mild side. Remember those racist Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry short films? Warner Brothers' way of saying sorry was just cutting the racism out of their shorts or not putting the extremely racist ones up for streaming. And then also, they gave us this note. The cartoons you are about to see are products of their time. They may depict some of the ethnic and racial prejudices that were commonplace in American society. These depictions were wrong and they are wrong today.
While the following does not represent the Warner Bros. View of today's society, these cartoons are being present as they were originally created, because to do otherwise would be the same as claiming these prejudices never existed. Wow, thank you for apologizing. People of color don't have to forgive the company for this. And I'm someone who loves Tom and Jerry and loves the Looney Tunes when you push away the racist aspects of them. But if someone wants nothing to do with Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry because of them being racist, there's nothing wrong with that. The creators of these very racist films literally are part to blame for why black people were getting treated so terribly in real life because of the negative influence that they had on real people. Tom and Jerry and Looney Tunes often copied minstrel shows. They added this in to their cartoons. And what do you know? More people think minstrelsy was okay because they saw it in a cartoon and it was played off for giggles and laughs. And that's what minstrelsy was. Shows that made fun of black people for giggles and laughs. And y'all know one of the worst movies of all time? A Birth of a Nation? Influenced more white people to join the KKK.
Ew, she's back, but I wanted to elaborate a little bit more about black forgiveness when it comes to more extremes, because I could say the civil rights movement was a big extreme where literally black people were literally getting beaten to death in the street and set on fire and shit, and they forgave the white people for doing that to them. Like, what? But I want to talk about a more modern day version of this, and I want to talk about the situation with Trayvon Martin. If you don't know who Trayvon Martin is, do your damn research. You should know who this person is. But Trayvon Martin's mother, people are like expecting her to forgive George Zimmerman, the man who killed her son. Like, I'm gonna read you this right here. Trayvon Martin's mother, Sabrina Filton, said earlier this year that she had not been able to forgive George Zimmerman for killing her son in Florida in 2012. I think black people are not forced to forgive, but they are expected to forgive because there are so many times where we have forgiven people who have done mean, evil, and nasty things to us, she told Essence magazine. She don't gotta forgive that man at all. He literally took her child away. Like, no, she does not have to forgive. And people be like, oh, well, black people should forgive their oppressors for doing this and that and the third for their sake and their well-being. Some of y'all don't need to be forgiven for the horrible things y'all have did. I'm sorry. George Zimmerman does not need to be forgiven for what he's done. Bye.
Like when networks feel guilty for not including black people in their works and then they add black people in there as their way of saying sorry, hoping that their black audience will forgive them for not having them there in the past. Looking at you, Disney. One of the best examples I can think of this I can bring up for this case is Camila Cabello. Camila Cabello was dragged to hell and back for her extremely racist comments towards people of color, not just black people. She said stuff about everybody, y'all. It was whew. And she has done better about unlearning her racist ways and is doing much, much better about how she viewed people of color. But those people that she hurt don't have to forgive her. And another example of this would be good old Dr. Seuss, who has a very, very racist past with making racist and anti-Semitic political cartoons. And not just political cartoons, because some of this shit was in his published works. Like, huh? His most popular book, The Cat in the Hat, is based off of minstrelsy. It don't get no worse than this. But after time, he stopped making this kind of art because he acknowledged that he was wrong and did better about the way he viewed people that weren't like him. People of color and Jewish people do not have to forgive the hurt that Dr. Seuss caused them. Because of how racist and anti-black fandom is, it's often expected for most to forgive white characters for being wrong, but drag the characters of color for every little thing they do. Last time I checked, people of color don't dislike white characters because they're white. When I see criticism for white characters made by fans of color, most of them are valid when it's not touching the subject of misogyny and have absolutely nothing to do with them being white. But when I see people make lists and things about a character of color they don't like, Oftentimes, they will like a white character who did similar things as such. On Tumblr, when I talk about these subjects, I often get these kinds of response, and I'm like, no. We often see this in real life and media because life and art mirror each other. White people are more likely to be forgiven for what they have done than when a person of color has done the same thing. And this isn't about them doing illegal things and shit like that. Like, no, we're not talking about that fuckery right there. This is about them making bad decisions and hurting the ones that they are closest to them. Let's get on the strange case of Chloe Bourgeois from Miss Miraculous Ladybug. Because I'm getting really sick and tired of people trying to make me like her. No. Chloe is one of the antagonists for a reason. She's bad. She's rude. She's nasty. She thinks the world revolves around her. Plenty of people, including me, found her comments about Asian people and her behavior towards them to be racist. And there's nothing wrong with people wanting to like Chloe's character. Not at all. If you're a Chloe stan and you're watching this, I'm not saying that you have to dislike her. No, you're free to do what you want. But it becomes an issue when people feel as if people's dislike for Chloe isn't valid. Because it is. We knew from the first time we saw her in this show, she was going to be a problem. Part of the reason Chloe gets away with what she does when it comes to the fans of this series has to do with the fact that she's white. I kid you not. I have seen Master Fu, a Chinese man, get dragged more than her for what he had done. And now let's get on the subject of Fu, because Master Fu has had a hard life. His parents forced him into labor as a child and forced him to get a job that he did not ask for. He literally did not choose his career path. And because of that, he spread his generational trauma onto another Chinese person. Is Fu wrong for that? Hell yes. But will people come to defend and understand why he did that, as they do for Chloe? Hell to the motherfucking no. Here we have a person who has been brutalized his entire life to the point where he doesn't understand what he's doing is wrong, which he should. Master Fu is wrong for not trying to unlearn his bad behavior. But Chloe, on the other hand, is fully aware of what she's doing. She knows she's a bitch, and she's proud of that. That girl does not want help. That girl enjoys being terrible. And part of that has to do with her being very, very immature. Chloe does have time to grow and change and be a better person. But at this stage in her life, she's not. And she doesn't really need all that much to be defended for. But people swear up and down that Chloe is great when she isn't. While Fu is not an antagonist, he has done awful things. And bad things happen to him in this show so often because of that. Chloe is an antagonist and has done awful things just as well, but rarely suffers for any of the consequences of her actions. And part of the reason Chloe can get away with what she does in the series and with the fans alike is because she's not only white, but because she's rich and she's a nepotism baby. Part of the reason she's rich has to do with her whiteness. It's been proven numerous times that white people are more likely to be rich over black people or just people of color in general. Don't believe me? Look it up. A lot of the shit that y'all be trying to go off on me is proven. It's factual. Do your fucking research. And this also has to do with the fact that more people are likely to take chances on white people. More people give white people opportunities before they consider giving them to another person of color, because white supremacy is ingrained in so many people's brains. White supremacy is normalized to the point where people do think white is better. And it doesn't. Just because someone is automatically white does not make them better than a person of color, my guy. Most up until season 5 and I think season 4, most of the people in charge of writing Miraculous were straight white men, and they're just now getting some women on the team, and I'm pretty sure those are white women. So most of the people in charge of writing Miraculous Ladybug are white people, and white people write what they know. That includes them letting white characters get away with whatever whenever, but treating their characters of color differently. And this show has a fat ass problem with that. Miraculous is very poorly written when it comes to the representation for people of color. I will elaborate more on this in my video I make about Gabriel Agrez, comparing him to Ed Wunsler from The Boondocks. That video is going to be a trip, and I cannot wait for you all to see it. But I have had to deal with white people similar to Chloe at work and at events that I have been to, and let me tell you, that is not the kind of person you want to be around. While it may be fun to watch a bad character be bad, having to deal with them in real life is a pain. And because I have had the displeasure of dealing with someone like this, I now find it very hard to like fictional characters like this. I like Sharpay Evans' character a lot as a child, and now I can't fucking stand her because I have had to deal with horrible white women like her at work. Robin, Dick Grayson, could be extremely mean, and I can't stand him now that I have had to deal with someone like him. People of color don't have to like mean fictional white people because of the effects that white privilege has had on everything, including the art we engage with. When it comes to not just creating characters, but how others interact with them, and how the fans react to them just as well, because
And to wrap up this discussion about, people of color not having to like fictional white mean characters, I really hope I got the point across correctly when it comes to this, because people seem to fail to realize that, like, here's the deal. I understand that good character does not always mean good person, but just because a character is a good character doesn't mean you have to like them. There's a lot of fictional characters out here that I think are great characters, but I don't care too much for them. Like Steve Harrington from Stranger Things. Like, everyone goes nuts over him, but I personally don't care. Like, I just don't like him. He reminds me a lot of guys I went to high school with. See, that's just part of the reason why I never really cared too much for Steve. But I'll be there to admit that he has had really great character development. Like, we can have both conversations when it comes to, I feel like when it comes to the media that we consume, a lot of people tend to forget that real life does exist, and how people feel about art is often how they feel about things in real life. Because I noticed, like, y'all know when I did the progenies, and it's still going, y'all. We we just need the funding. We're trying to get back there. I don't like Mal's character. Like, I don't like Mal and the original Descendants, like, at all. Like, period. But, like, for me to pretend like people like that don't exist would have been, like, unrealistic in a sense, too. And people stay begging and asking for TV shows and movies and book characters and all that to be more realistic. And when people show that realism there, like, hey, this is how certain people act and they're terrible, people want to get angry, or people want to get upset with people not liking said character. Like I said, if you express that there's a good character, does not always mean a good person. You express that there's a good character and how you don't like them, you will, and like I said, if they're right 9 times out of 10, there will be some white fandom person sitting there defending them. Like, baby, I understand they're a good character. Good character does not mean good person. Like, how many times do I have to say that in this conclusion? But that's just what so many white fandom people seem to forget. Especially, the racist section of fandom is that, like, how people feel about fiction is how they feel about real life people. Because while a lot of people of color don't like, racist white fictional characters, or just like, white characters that have like issues with white privilege and all of that stuff, that is very valid. But then you also remember that there's a lot of fandom people that dislike fictional characters simply because they are people of color. It's not the same thing at all. You're disliking a character because of their, race, something that they cannot control. People of color disliking a mean white character they're not disliking them because they're white. They dislike them because of white supremacy. Like, what part of that don't y'all understand? Like, I feel like I can get on here and scream and yell and argue with the brick wall all day, trying to preach, like, not preach, I say, but like teach the audience about what white privilege is. But then I also kind of have to come to the conclusion that a lot of y'all just don't understand it, nor do a lot of you want to. Like, that's just something I have had to learn, and I've had to learn this in school just as well, because I remember one of my African American studies teachers had even said, you should not be taking this course, you should not be pursuing this if you don't think racism exists. And I think this shit exists a lot. Like, I've been knew that. I've known that since I was like, little, and having to experience racism, like on the beauty supply store and all that jazz, okay? It's just like something I've learned about this fandom people. Like I said at the end of my last fandom racism videos, that some people simply don't understand and some people simply don't want to understand, because white supremacy is something that is so engraved in our society that so many people don't see an issue with it because it's so normalized. Like, that's very, very concerning. And because of how normalized it is, people think it's fine and they don't care to, like, when someone's like, hey, that's actually a bad thing, let me tell you why, they don't want to listen. Like, people just don't want to listen. And then I even mentioned before about how so many issues with, the film industry and the writing, because as we know, most of the writers' room in Hollywood is filled with white people, and for the longest it was only white people up until a certain point. And the way they would write people of color, and then the way they would write white characters interacting with the said colors, and then you would see how the white characters would be with other, like just everything. And it's just like, yeah, the main reason they can get away with doing that is because they're white and because they uphold this privilege over all the other people of color in this show and this and that and the third. It's just something to think about. I really highly recommend you guys like get into studying how people of color are portrayed in film and how white people are portrayed in film, by the way, just as well, because so much of the stuff we see white people do in movies, a lot of them do that stuff in real life and they get away with it and whatever the fuck. Like, of course it's gonna be a bit exaggerated because it is film, but then you also gotta remember that there's realism to this. But I feel like I'm just trying to wrap everything up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below for that algorithm, because this one's a long one. Yeah, the voiceover editing is not easy. I have a store. New items have dropped at harriyannahook.com. Use code HOTSPOT30 for 30% off your order. I also have donation links down below. I have Patreon. I have a web show, The Progenies. Please support our GoFundMe link so we can get back to filming. And you guys want to know where you can support me for free? Watch The Progenies for free. It's down below. And don't forget to follow me on everything at Harriyanna, HARRIYANNA. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a good night. 'Cause I work hard to get to this point in my life. I'm blowing up, so don't hate, just congratulate. The Powerpuff Girls will just blow your mind. Buttercup like villains 3 at a time. Bubbles will smile while kicking your butt, and Blossom will lead them out of their rut. Cherish and Powerpuff, 2 of a kind. Both wanna save the world before bedtime. From Townsville, Memphis, New York to LA, the Powerpuff Girls are just here to stay. They coming through and fighting, and everyone they're shocking. No one can stop them all because of the